3 of the candidates of the 2021 Crazy House World Championships. We start off with a round 3 match between opperwezen and 264brocc. Opperwezen being the favorite. He's a former Crazy House World Champion. But 264brocc has shown that he's a very dangerous player since he reached the candidates anyway. Let's see if they are about to start now. I can't spell. Opperwezen. Okay, so apparently he's not even online. Let's see if 264. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Yanis. Neither player online yet, but unless I'm mistaken, they are about to start any second now. So let's just double check. Today it's Sunday, September 5th, and it is 8 p.m. Well, not here in Sweden, it's 9 p.m, but they should be starting any minute. Let's have a quick look at the table. As you can see, Jan Lee hasn't even started his matches yet. But opperwezen has had a really good start, beating Dog Answer 8-2 and Mariotten 9-1. Whereas 264brocc has tied his match against Mariotten. So if you compare these two results, you can see that opperwezen is a clear favorite to take this tonight. They will play 10 games regardless of the outcome, because in the candidates every game counts. It's not a knockout, it's a round robin, all play all. And I wonder where they are. So, maybe they started. Yes, they did. And opperwezen is playing with another account called Vattenelände. I don't know how to say it. But I will call him opperwezen, just so you know. Well, we are watching 264brocc versus opperwezen in the candidates for the 2021 World Championships in Crazy House. And as you can see, 264brocc has chosen the popular d4 and followed by a fianchetto on the king's side. It's a very solid setup. And opperwezen is playing a solid setup as black also. Putting the light square bishop outside the pawn chain. And maybe these knights will try to infiltrate on the light squares eventually. Oh, I thought I set the stream title. Didn't I? Oh, just bear with me when I'm gonna fix this. No, I didn't. So, let's go back to the game. We didn't miss much. So, 264brocc wondering how to proceed here. He decided to trade the bishops and put the bishop back immediately. Maybe he's looking to trade it for 2 pawns. So opperwezen quickly decides to protect the h6 pawn. Now this is an interesting move, because now this is under attack, and also there is pressure on the d5 pawn. Maybe at some point white can take on d6, and then when the queen takes back you can put a pawn on e5 just to gain the initiative. Just an idea. And 264brocc he just keeps putting pressure on the light squares here. A lot of pawns here in the center. Lots of control for both players. Now this is a nice square for the knight, attacking d4, and also a lot of squares in the white camp, and also defending some important pawns. Opperwezen is slightly ahead of the clock, and I would say the position is about even. Neither player has any real weaknesses. So this is a preemptive move, anticipating an opening of the G file. And this is actually a bit difficult to defend, and opperwezen spots that if he can attack it twice, it's hard for white to defend it. And that pawn is it's important. If black can pick it up, he will be better for sure. So white goes for this pseudo sacrifice. Well, it is a sacrifice, not of a piece, but rather of a pawn. But it's not the best possible moment, because now black picks up more material, and white is lost here. Maybe I was quick to say that he's lost. White found a nice way of gaining a piece back. Taking on g2 would have been a bit dangerous, but it's slow, but you get the piece back. I'm not sure what the idea was What was with king h1? Yeah, maybe putting a knight on g1. So this will end with the time scramble. Opperwezen is picking up some material here. Just putting all his pieces in nice places. I expect maybe a bishop here on e5. Exerting even more pressure on the white position. And now those extra pawns are really starting to hurt white here. White is in deep problems. He's mating. Okay, that was super solid play by Opperwezen in the first game. So 1-0. And welcome to everybody watching. We see another d4, d5 opening. But Opperwezen plays a more classic setup. Not fianchettoing his light square bishop, rather trading it to strengthen the center. And once again we will see a positional fight where all the little nuances of the position will decide who gets the advantage. I think already white is slightly better here. He has better control in the center. This is a very natural move. And also it's easy for white to go forward with the knight. And black blunders a piece, a very important piece. He would have wanted a knight here, covering the king and also protecting the bishop, but he doesn't have one. And you can't afford to lose pieces like that. White might even consider trading the queen for the rook. Not only did white get the extra piece here, but he got a nice initiative also. A little tactical trick by black, taking on d2, because if white takes back, the bishop on e2 is hanging, but this little lady is hanging also. Black got a nice little counterattack here. This move is annoying. White is threatening to take on f7. And then take the queen with check. And this looks super dangerous. Rook here, queen takes, and then you take on f7 probably. And you pick up the queen with check, as I said before. And maybe white has some time here too. I'm not sure what to do here. Do you put a bishop here maybe so the king cannot hide? Do you start checking? The problem is you don't only have a bishop and pawn, and all the checking squares are covered. So maybe he missed that the bishop was covering h5, I'm not sure. So this is both a defensive move. The queen is a very powerful defender, and naturally it's also an offensive move, threatening to take e6. And also the fact that it covers h5 will come in handy. Let's say black takes on f1. Black has a lot of material stacked up, but it will take quite a while to put the pieces on the board. Well, this is a good start, threatening the queen, covering a lot of light squares, and black is just trying to mend his position. But this move threatens two pieces. A very valuable knight for white. And it looks like he has all the pieces he needs now to start a real attack. Yeah, a nifty little move, covering the last rank, so the king cannot go further than to h7, and this bishop blocks h7, so the king is in deep trouble now, and it's about to get mated. This queen covers the h5 file, the knight covers g6, and the e-pawn will push, and it's mate. So 2-0 for opperwezen. Two very convincing victories in the first two games. And this is unusual. 264brocc goes for an early fianchetto, and opperwezen answers with a sort of a Sicilian setup here. You don't see this very often. Yeah, of course you could have taken f8, but I suppose white would have played maybe bishop at g8 then also. Because, and the point is, you just need to make sure the black king is caught in the middle of the board. So I'm not sure what is happening here. Can white play e5? b6 was really provocative. Yeah. What is this? So black lost rook for a pawn, but the light squares are super weak here. Looks like black got some interesting compensation. Yeah, look, he's trying to lure the bishop away so we can make a smothered mate here. And what happens if white puts his rook on a8? Queen takes, bishop takes. I don't quite understand what is happening here. So do you place your pawn here? But oh, this is really complicated. You see, black doesn't have a lot of pieces in case of a check on the back rank. But how is white supposed to... Now you can just move your king, right? Because black doesn't want to place his rook on the board, he wants to place the rook here on f1 and deliver mate. What if you simply play king d8? So this is starting to look very ugly for white. You can take here with check and then put a rook on f1. Although giving heavies to white might put black in jeopardy here, so black has to be a little bit careful. Yes, he decides to put the rook on f1 anyway. And these guys are covering a lot of squares here in the defense. Wow. So apparently opperwezen has spotted some mating net here. And it had better be mate, because this move blocks the view for the bishop and also takes away the Cover for the e8 square. Is there a mate? Well, it looks as there's a perpetual anyway, but nothing more. So 2.5 versus a half point. Very interesting play by both players. I thought opperwezen had that, but he couldn't find a way forward. Maybe picking up the queen was the way to go. So a completely different opening every game now. Opperwezen playing e4 instead. And when white pushes and you go to d5 rather than forward, the knight is a bit it's kind of lured away from the king side. And white decides to start massaging those black squares. Obviously taking here is not a good idea because white will take on d5 and then put the knight to work on g7. But this is a natural response. The g file will probably be opened pretty soon, and then the rook is just fine on g7, I think. White wants to get control over the dark squares, and now maybe taking on d5 and checking on f6 was a threat. But what about taking here on f4 now? And then checking. Yeah, this might be even better. I suppose black could take here, but then white simply takes on f4. Nice little tactic by opperwezen. He's really good at spotting these mini tactics. So black does take on g5, but now white is up a piece against the pawn, and that rook is in a bad spot. But it found a better spot, actually, threatening the knight. I don't see a really good square for this bishop, for this knight. Going forward is out of the question. Do you simply protect it? Yes, he put a bishop on g3 just protecting the knight. Black wants to cover some squares here that are weak, but also attacks the knight at the same time. Thank you so much. Do we have a crowd here? Yeah, we do. And in half an hour we will be watching Zyxon versus Catask. So, White decides to give that knight for some attacking chances, because if Black takes here, White takes, Black takes, the rook is super dangerous here on g8. And I don't see how Black can survive this, actually. He has too many pieces waiting in line. No, I will never compete again. I just want to play some relaxed crazy house. I competed too much 20-25 years ago. So very thematic, very instructive little way here, opening the 7th rank and queening a pawn. Great pressure on Black here. The queen can, the sort of queen, because it's just a queen. As long as White has it, it's a pawn. If Black captures it. Yeah, the queen was threatening to take on g7. And it looks like the Black position is falling to pieces now. Maybe rook takes g7 at some point. Well, it wasn't necessary. Yeah. So this is simply over. Taking, no, it's mate even. And queen b3 is mate, I think. So how do you do this? Only a few seconds left. And it's not important to find a forced mate here. You just need to play some sensible moves. Black doesn't have anything, and just play some sensible moves. Threatening knight d7. Mate. Complete control there by opperwezen. So it's 3.5. And we'll see a new opening again. So previously 264brocc fianchetto his light square bishop, Now he goes on a quick attack here, and actually this is interesting. It takes some time, but he won an important pawn, and I'm not sure opperwezen saw this coming. Actually, it looks a bit dangerous here. This looks like a strong attacking move, because if you take, the queen is actually trapped here on d8. And as you can see, opperwezen is thinking here. The black position is a mess after just a few moves. Well, black has to give material somehow. And this is an interesting way of doing it, because if white takes, black is looking to sacrifice maybe on f2, but looks like the king can hide over here. So white chooses a safer option, just bringing the knight home with tempo. And maybe g4 is good here. I'm thinking bishop g6, and then you can take on g6 with a discovered threat here, and then you can just pick up the rook in the corner. So 264brocc thinking a lot here also. First time in the match that he got a good position out of the opening. F3 looked really slow. Surely f3 wasn't the way to go. And black quickly, now he plays g4. Okay. But now the knight is hanging. And yes. So black giving the queen for 2 pieces. Question is, should he take here, or should he take on f4 maybe? So he plays g2 just to be able to take with on f4 with a threat on the bishop. Nice little tactic by opperwezen. And I'm starting to like black here, actually. So black doesn't have time to take the queen, and he had to protect d7 here. But now if white takes, black will take the queen for sure. Looks like black is in great shape here. Nice move. Protecting e3, covering the dark squares. And now black has super control in the defense. Yeah, you could even take on e3, because if the queen takes, you can place the bishop on d4. And black really wants that rook. White's king will be naked in just a little while here. Maybe bishop at f4, yeah. Keeping everything protected. Mating threat on e7, and this attacks and defends at the same time. This poor guy is out of play, but it's covering c5, as you can see. So, is there a mate after queen takes c6? Probably there is, yeah. Queen b5, knight b7, and the first win for 264brocc. Opperwezen choosing another opening, playing a3, and now he decides to play a gambit with tempo up. Very interesting, provocative play by opperwezen, because this move is actually very useful in the e4 d5 gambit lines. So this will lead to very active play for white if black decides to pick up the glove and take the pawn. And this is the kind of move I don't like at all, because it's so passive. He had an extra pawn, but it's wasted on the queen side. Just protecting this pawn. So already I think white is better here with all the open diags for his bishops. Yes, I was looking at h6. The point is, of course, if black takes, the rook is hanging. And if black takes here, the bishop takes. Bringing the queen out is a bit double-edged. So, if black takes here, the queen will surely take on e3. Black's spending a lot of time here. I'm not sure why. Another passive pawn move here. And white quickly gives his queen for 2 pieces. So maybe rook d1. Pinning the pawn, but maybe then black will give back his queen. No, that just looks good for white. Rook d1, take here, trade, and then pawn, bishop g5, taking back on e3. Looks good for white. Wow, that looked dangerous. Okay, so he decides to take on g7 first and then put his rook on d1. But now d4 is protected. If he hadn't taken on g7, he could have taken on d4 now, twice. Oh, he plays so aggressively here. Will we see another pawn drop on d5 maybe? This is a very sensible move. The queen is very good defender, as I pointed out before, and also you can run to the queen side if necessary. And this was probably forced. Black has to try to get an attack of his own. And actually it looks dangerous. The king does a bit of dancing here. You don't want to take on f2 because then the knight drops on e4, but now if you play knight f4 then you can take on f2 probably. But still it looks really dangerous. Knight here. Okay, it rechecks there instead. So we can go back to e4. Black is running out of material, or is he? Looks like opperwezen knows just how to dance around with his king. So black changes gears here and brings his queen home to defend. But now surely white is winning. He has a ton of material. He just has to be careful so black doesn't get an attack. Yeah, quickly place those pieces. A rook here in the corner would be good for white. And now it's about to get mated. Queen e8 is mate. A very tense game. And opperwezen is once again victorious. 4.5, 1.5. two64brocc choosing an early fianchetto, and opperwezen just runs his h-pawn up the board. And I'm not sure what is happening here. Maybe this pawn on h2 is just a weakness, waiting to be captured. Or can opperwezen conjure up some magic here? Yes, he can, because if you take here, there's a knight fork, and you can take on g5. But instead he decides to go for the f2 pawn, because if white takes here, you have a check here and a discovered threat on g5. Some nice opper magic here. And the knight is threatening to take on g3 also. Everything works just fine for black here. Maybe it's time to harass this guy with a pawn here. No, he decides to increase the pressure on g2. Now he has a spot for the bishop, maybe, at some point. But black has some serious weaknesses on the last rank, and white has two rooks in hand. Also, this rook is of course threatening the pawn on h3. And black cannot afford to give the pawn on h3, I suspect, because not only with the h3 pawn fall, the knight is trapped in the corner also. So maybe bishop g2. But this is by no means an ideal setup for black. I see some tactical problems here. White can take on f6, and if the queen takes, you can play rook takes f8 and put a knight on h7, forking king and queen. So I'm suspecting that opperwezen's tricks have backfired a bit. Also, you can see opperwezen's clock is running low. So I think this is a huge threat now. Bishop taking f6. Yeah, and maybe you just take here now. I don't see anything good for black after bishop takes f6. And now you can do everything with check, because if the king goes here, you can simply play rook at e8. And you can take on f8, you can bring in the other queen on h6. It should be over fairly soon. Blocking the exit. And the queen will check here and it's mate on e7. Nice win by 264brocc. 4.5, 2.5. And I will follow this match to the end and then quickly switch to zyxon versus catask. And we see the same opening as before. And opperwezen deviating with a long castle. Although castling long here is very provocative, I think. Black can quickly get an attack, maybe play a5 and put a pawn on b4, for instance. I'm not sure I like the white setup here. So a5, my instincts tell me that a5 is the move. Or maybe pawn at f5 is a problem. Yeah, it is. Too bad. This is a very odd position. It's almost like both players are bad here. Both players are slightly worse. No, I'm just kidding. I can't quite make out what to do here for either player. Very tricky position. Taking on d4 is a bad idea for white because you trade and then you can place a bishop on e3, picking up the knight on d4. But you need to do something about this, about this threat. Or don't you? White decides you don't have to do anything. Because if black takes here, maybe white will take on e6. Looks dangerous. Just because a piece is threatened, you don't need to move it. And I think the match is starting pretty soon between zyxon and catask. Maybe I will be switching back and forth, I'm not sure. So black blocks the e5, giving him time to pick up the knight on c3. So do you take on c3 now? Rook takes here, maybe take on b2 also. Threatening knight c3 check. Forking king and queen. Also taking on c3 and then pawn a2 was interesting. So how dangerous was rook takes e6? Well, black decided it was dangerous to take on e6 anyway. But maybe at some point you have to do it anyway. Yeah. Black takes on e6. And now white gets a really nasty attack. Look at those bishops doing a tremendous offensive and defensive job. The king looking to find shelter on c8. But white will try to demolish the black defenses, maybe take on a6. Yeah. Black in bad shape here. White threatening to take somewhere. Oh, we found a nice little defensive move here, checking and keeping an eye on a6. So will this keep black alive? It looks like it will. Because now there's a mating threat on a1. Rook a1 threatening. This is ending in a time scramble. Wow. And now let's check. It seems like white cannot get to the... Black cannot get to the white king. Wow, wow, wow. Five and a half, 2.5, and we will quickly look at the other match here between Zyxon and Catask. And they just started playing. This is the first game. And e4, e6. White quickly gives a piece. Is this a theoretical line? I don't know. Very interesting play. Both players need to worry about their kings. And it's nice to interpose with the bishop here, because you don't want this bishop defending c7. And if the knight takes, black loses control over d2. And Catask is under a bit of pressure here, I think. Material is fairly equal. The standard pawn sacrifice just to lure the king out a little bit. It's usually worth a pawn in an open position like this. But of course, white might consider simply moving the king, although this pawn will be dangerous then. So white didn't want to allow bishop takes c3, that's why he sacrificed the pawn on c7. And Catask is down to his last few seconds here. Strong defense here with the bishops. Black wants to take on d4, put the knight to work at e4. And maybe the white king is simply too weak here, I don't know. And the king goes out on the board. Wow. And that's checkmate. Okay. So Catask is in the lead, 1-0. Let's go back to the other match. We left them at 5.5, 2.5, and we see 264brocc. playing a fianchetto, d4, d5 opening. And I really like how opperwezen is handling this for black. Just playing positionally, putting his pieces to work. And this queen is ready to pick up an important pawn on a2. Also pointing down here. Yeah, it's really dangerous to get low on time against catask. It's dangerous just to sit on the other side of the board versus catask. Catask is clearly the favorite to win the candidates, and maybe the only player I think that might pose a threat is opperwezen. So what is happening here? It looks like white has a lot of pawns, but a piece less. And a piece for 2 pawns is not a problem. And these pawns are actually quite good here, although white would need an extra tempo to get the attack started. If only he had the time to put a pawn here on f6, white's attack would be just crushing. Oh, thank you so much. Sorry for keeping you awake. Quite the crowd here. And I suspect that queen has to move. Yes, the queen had to move. But does black have time to do anything here? Pawn at f6. Looks so dangerous. Does black place his rook on c1? Yeah. And now what? So, I want to see pawn f6 here. Yeah, pawn f6. And the threat is to simply take on g7 and knight h6 mate. And it's not so easy to defend here. And for instance, you cannot give a rook here as black because it might be mate on h8. So maybe oh, did white just mess this up, or no? Wow. So black is crashing through here. Poor 264brocc. You had him there. I'm sure you did. Let's look at that game. the end. I'm sure you had something here. Yeah, white is... No. Yes, no. Oh, the computer cannot make up its mind. Who's better here? So pawn at f6. Oh, this isn't clear. I thought white was much better here. Oh well, we won't find out. But after this, black is just winning. And crushing attack in the end by opperwezen. So I'm gonna look at the other match here. Sorry for the confusion. But we have another really tense game here. Let's just quickly look at what's happening here. Zyxon just trying to get a position to play. And catask down to his last 10 seconds here. He has a ton of light pieces. And it does look like catask is better here. So the white has trapped the black king in the mating net here. But he would have needed a pawn for b5. And fearless defense here by Zyxon. White wants to pick up a queen with check, so the b6 square is taboo. Wow, this is dangerous. Let's go. Zyxon. And he got a queen on b1. Oh my. This is winning for black. Yay! And Zyxon equalizes 1-1. Very surprising. Let's go back to 264brocc and opperwezen. So this is 6.5, 2.5, and it's the last game of the match. And what happened in the opening? Oh, we see an f4 here, followed by a fianchetto. Aggressive play by black here, and I suspect that black is winning here. Opperwezen's little opening experiment has failed utterly, I think. What if you take on h2 and at some point you can even give the queen for the bishop? Yeah, this is winning for black. I don't see anything. Simply pawn here is good as well. Everything is good. Although I kind of like the queen sacrifice, followed by pawn f2. Or is that too brutal? I don't know. So where is the killer move here? Surely pawn at f2 is good for black. White needs to take. Yeah, and he just resigned. So the match ended 6.5, 3.5 in favor of opperwezen. Maybe the winning margin was slightly less than expected. Congratulations to opperwezen anyway. And now we will follow zyxon, who has put up great resistance here in the beginning. Surprisingly great resistance. Let's see what happened in the opening. e4, and in the first game we saw white taking on d5, and here zyxon plays it a bit differently. So this is a battle for f6. White sacrificed a pawn just to weaken the f6 square. He wants to pick up a knight and fork on f6, but black tries to defend f6 with pawns. White giving a piece. Lots of stuff going on here. And Catask once again spending a lot of time. And his queen is in a bit of a... in some problems, I think. White can pick up a knight when he wants to. But he could also go for the queen, maybe. Because if you play bishop g3 and the queen retreats, g4 is probably a super bad square, because then you can take on c6 and fork on f6, but bishop g3, queen going back to f6, then you can take here, and then maybe play bishop e5 with all sorts of threats here. Yes, zyxon plays bishop g3. And Catask realizes he has to give the queen and try to fix those dark squares. A nice idea for black here would maybe be to simply play rook takes d1 and check with a knight on b2, pick up c4. But now that white got to castle, seems like we have a position to play here. Ah, I see. Well, I can actually see the comments myself, and right now it's not so interesting. I haven't quite figured out how to get the perfect setup. But I think I prefer to have my Twitch viewers being able to comment there rather than the viewers on lead chess. And I'm not sure what's going on here. Looks like catask had it under control there for a while, but now suddenly the dark squares look a bit weak. And catask found a nice way to fix that. But another knight is heading towards d4. And the material is equal. Looks like white is under pressure though. Yeah, that's a great way of attacking. On the first rank, black crashing through here. And since black's king is super safe here, I expect resignation pretty soon. Now black has all the pieces he needs and no way for white to defend. Heavy's landing all over the place here. So 2-1 catask. And I'm curious, let me just check. How was the game there? What did the computer think about the opening? So both players trading mistakes. Yeah, queen takes e4 was strong. Yeah, it's just an unclear position. Sorry, back to the game. And Zyxon playing flexible setup for black, albeit a bit passive. Actually, I'm not sure that bishop d7 is a good move. The bishop might very well be better off at c8, where it's not blocking the queen. And I think catask is handling this nicely, just playing natural moves, making his extra space count. That's a nice move. Attacking and defending at the same time. Also attacking e4, which might be a slight problem for white. If black can play pawn at d4, for instance. Well, this looks okay for black. It looks so okay that catask gives his queen for that lovely little knight on d6. And is this really enough for the queen? Yeah, queen e7 defends the e6 square. Also, black has great freedom here in choosing where to put his king, either on the king side or the queen side. This is surely not enough for the queen. A rather speculative sacrifice here by catask. Maybe rook f8 just to bolster the defense. Because after rook f8 then you might be able to take on f5. Now this is also a nice move, because if you take on e3, the knight on g5 is hanging. You have to look out though, if black gets a bishop, he could have forked the king and the knight. This is the kind of position white was aiming for, I think. I would have liked to see the black rook on f8 instead. So black's king is having some problems here. But the queen attacking g2 is dangerous. Black can even take on g2 with the queen, probably. And another interesting move is simply to take the rook with the queen. Let's say a passive move like pawn g3, then black will probably take on e3. Well, he might consider it anyway. Catask spending a lot of time here. So an important zwischenzug here. You need to cover g4 so you can take here without risk. Otherwise, a knight check here would have been nasty. And now white has perfect control. Threatening queen at d8, d7 mate. Also knight at f7 is a problem for black. Actually, knight at f7 would have been great there, because bishop takes and queen trade here, and you have a mate threat on d7. Anyway, this is good for white as well. Everything coming with check here. And being down to the last 20 seconds is not a problem for catask. Look at how safe the white king is. Well, if black takes on h3, surely white will take with the bishop rather than the pawn. Okay, maybe I'm delirious here. Let's check. Yeah. So if black takes here, you take with the bishop and not with the pawn. So what's happening here? Let's go back. And very interestingly, catask doesn't sacrifice the knight as some players do. He plays a more open game here. And judging by zyxon's time consumption, we're out of the book. Or out of zyxon's book anyway. Catask is leading 3-1. And white is looking to win the knight. Although I think the compensation is acceptable. For instance, after like bishop f5 or something. Should be ample compensation. And that's an interesting move. He takes a pawn for f2 here. Oh, this is a very nasty initiative for black. He can simply retreat with the knight if he likes to. Or does he have anything more dangerous? Just retreating to c5 looks sensible, I think. White is permanently weak around the king. So it looks like we will have a piece sacrifice here. White trying to make a chess game out of this. Waiting for the right opportunity to pick up the piece on e4. It's not going anywhere. Well, it's not going anywhere where it cannot be taken anyway. Black was running out of moves there, so he picks up a pawn just to keep the momentum going. And maybe a pawn can land here on b2, forking rook and bishop. But there are a lot of interesting moves. So the knight will probably go back to c4, where it threatens the queen. This move covers c4. That's a very aggressive queen move, threatening e5. And that's a nice square, threatening the h-pawn. Bringing the king to safety, and black is ready to get a real attack going here. Now the h-pawn is hanging again. Slight problem for white. And white's attack is simply too slow, I think. Maybe knight at d3. Yeah, knight d3. Blocking the a-pawn's advance here. And if pawn at b4, you'd simply take it with the bishop and get 2 pawns. Oh, static noise. I put my phone away. Maybe it's that's causing the noise. I'm not sure. Yeah, catask has a strong position here, although his time is anything but strong. He's always playing these dual purpose moves. For instance, that bishop there threatening here and here. And now the position opens up and it's just over again. Black can afford to pick up a few pieces. And even sacrifice his queen. And it's made in a few moves here. So a rook here. And then a pawn here. Yeah. 4-1 catask. Yeah, it was probably my phone. And the idea with this move, I think, is to go to h3 when white has some nice tactical threats. And that is probably why Zyxon played queen c8, just to keep an eye on h3. And black has to look out, because taking here and then just moving away the knight, and a knight fork might happen here on c7. So black protects c7 and white wants to get rid of the knight. Looks like white has a very harmonious setup here. And I'm expecting maybe queen h4 unless black does anything here. And I'm not sure where to put that bishop then. Because there are pins and stuff on the h file. Okay, so this prevents white's idea temporarily anyway. But on the other hand, now bishop takes here is annoying. Maybe. Black had to take with the pawn because otherwise there was the fork on c7. And maybe even taking here, e takes, and then queen takes g7. Is that an option? I was thinking bishop takes and pawn to d7. It looks dangerous. So my idea, okay, he didn't play that. I'm curious, and I will have to look after the game on my idea. So this is putting pressure on this bishop. Let's say black takes here, you take on h7, and then all sorts of nasty things are bound to happen here with a bishop check coming, either on g6 or on f7. Also there is the threat of taking on f6 and playing bishop at d7. And this is very instructive. Rather than checking, doing a contact check here on f7, you check from a distance, keeping this square free for the knight. And this is actually close to mate now. So white left his queen hanging. Is there a mate? The king does have an escape route here. And white just handling the position positionally. There is a rook on h8 waiting to be captured. And zyxon is hanging in there. This bishop is important. Otherwise, queen takes h2 would have been interesting. Tremendous positional pressure here by white, but he has to be careful, because what about queen takes h2? Or maybe it was nothing, but picking up the queen surely will decide matters here. The queen can land on d6. Just making a square available for the queen. And zyxon runs out of time. I just want to take a quick look at what is super good here. I was thinking bishop takes, bishop takes. Aha, there's also knight at d6. Very interesting. The move I suggested was this, and indeed it looks very good also for white. Oh, and in the end, did black have any tricks with queen takes h2? White is actually... Yeah, here. Black has knight at g4. Knight at g4. And this is just bad. Or is it? No, this is winning for black. Oh my. Yeah, this is winning for black. And the idea is to play this. So, zyxon missed a golden opportunity there. Sorry, let's go back to the game. And we see yeah. I was surprised that he didn't go for queen takes h2. And zyxon is going for a chess-like setup, keeping the game pace slow, not allowing any vicious sacrifices. This is very much like how I like to play the game. And this is also very much like me, because I constantly miss that kind of tactical move. So maybe black will try to make something out of this pin. Meanwhile, white has his own pin here on the rook, which he makes use of. Black quickly closes the b5, making the bishop look rather silly on a6. Threatening e5. And if the queen lands on e5, you have threats on G7 and C7. Catask spending a lot of time here. So this protects e5, but zyxon was prepared. He wants to push that knight away. White looks really open here, but he doesn't have much material. So this blocked b file again, so he could pick up the bishop. A nice little move, the dual purpose move, allowing him to pick up f6. Now there's a threat on c3 maybe. A nice little tactic here, because now you have check here. And maybe you simply trade rooks and check on d2, or what do you do? The problem though is that you don't have any real blockers when white checks on the... So rook b8 here. What do you block with? No, you have knight at f6 now, don't you? No, you don't. Yes, you do. No, you don't. Maybe you do. Yeah, knight f6. Yeah, because if you take with the queen on zyxon 1, yeah. If you take with the queen on c3, you can take on b1 with a check as black. Nice little win by zyxon, 5-2 catask. And zyxon showed in his first match, where he beat variants only with the a2, that he will be dangerous for all the players. Yeah, well, b4 was protected by the queen also. You had a queen on h4 protecting b4. So Catask seems to know what he's doing in this opening. He got an excellent position in the last game, so I don't know about underrated, but he's 2650 or something, which makes him a top 10 player, I suppose. And zyxon is an original gangster Bughouse player. He's been around almost as long as I have. And by the way, me and zyxon won the Swedish Bughouse Championships a few weeks ago. White is enjoying his position here. These double pawns are protecting a lot of squares in the center, and the rooks are on semi-open files. Oh, there was the pawn on f4. My bad. So a nice little trading the rook for 2 pawns and gaining a very serious initiative here. If the pawn takes, you take with the knight, and then you take on e5, and then all sorts of problems. Yes, I was his partner. And this is starting to look hopeless for black. White can place all his pieces with tempo, everything protected. No good squares for the queen. A complete disaster for black. And look at those bishops. Yeah, black just resigned. 6-2 catask. And that is what makes catask such a great player. He gets a little advantage to work with, and he just is like a boa constrictor. He just strangles his victim. The symmetrical opening here, which should mean that white is slightly better here. Threatening c6, and also you have some interesting options, sacrificing on f7. Which is why black decides to pin this knight, and white quickly unpins. So how do you do this? Do you take on h3 and place a knight on f4 maybe? The thing with taking on h3 and giving up the rook is that it would leave b7 and a7 very vulnerable. But Zyxon goes for his opponent's throat. So he's winning the queen, but a rook. But he doesn't get a rook. Because if you take here, the queen takes and it's mate on d8. Otherwise a rook on h1 would be killing, of course. Well, I suppose nothing prevented him from going to d6 with the queen, but you could take on f7 and maybe play pawn e5, forking the queen and the knight. I'm not sure. So unless white gets mated here, he will win this game. He's up a lot material wise. But you shouldn't take here because knight h3 is mate then. And obviously black wants to place a pawn on f2. And this is interesting because not only do you fork the king and the rook, but you provoke black maybe to place a pawn on d7, which it doesn't want to do. Well, black didn't. So what to do here? You don't want to give black any more material than he already has. So this is the interesting, because you not only do you protect f2, you also block the h3 square, so black doesn't have the opportunity to place a knight there at some point. So a super sharp position here. I wouldn't be surprised if white is actually winning here, objectively speaking. And if placing a pawn on b7 was the best move, that is bad news for black, I think. I seriously doubt that this is enough. So you cannot take here because of knight f2, picking up the queen. But right now there isn't much of a threat. So now actually it is a threat to take the bishop, because then white will be threatening to mate on d7. And is the white queen about to get trapped? Maybe it is. The score is 6-2 in favor of catask. But we have had quite a few tense games, and zyxon actually missed a forced mate in one game. He lost. So zyxon going for the black king, but it doesn't look like he has enough. And now it's mate. Okay, but it didn't really matter there. I'm just curious, how was that game? I was thinking white was doing just fine. Yeah, the computer likes this idea, absolutely. But it didn't like f3. Knight takes e4 is apparently much better. Followed by queen c6. And now queen c6 was really strong. And as someone pointed out, I'm not sure if it was in this position, but knight takes e4 at some point would have been really strong. So actually pawn b7 was the best move. And the problem for white is that his queen got trapped here. Yeah, and now black is winning. So back to the game. Black once again playing that flexible setup. An early h4 from white. And well, d4 is hanging, so looks like compensation for black. Oh, he goes forward with the king. That's interesting, to say the least. So the question is, do you want to trade queens here as black? Or do you just want to play positionally? This was unexpected, to say the least. Yeah, where would I go with the king? I'm not sure. Well, it's a very hypothetical question because I wouldn't play this setup as white anyway with early h4. So each player has a queen, and this looks very primitive, but maybe it's the move in this position. I'm not sure. Although it doesn't, it's not mate if black simply takes here. Knight here, but the king can escape to d8. And catask thinking a lot here. This is the last game, catask leading 7-2. Yeah, zyxon quickly taking the knight. And after knight g5, the king will find his safe square here on d8. And this looks good for black. So the king is in trouble here for white. Maybe simply pawn g3 and pawn d4. e3 is an interesting square also. And now we have two queens. So queen at g4 is mate. 7-3. Catask wins 7-3, and I think Zyxon is quite happy with that result. Not many players that can pick 3 points from catask in a match with 10 games. And Zyxon made that look easy in the last game. So, thank you guys for watching. Quite a little audience here. And you know what? Now I'm an affiliate for Twitch, and the money will just start rolling in here. I will celebrate with a hot dog when my first cents hit my bank account. Thanks for watching, and take care.